Okay, anyone got the final results of the FD?
Same with the one on the slide, sir.
Okay, how about the others?
Same as the slide.
Okay. Okay, maybe if there is a slight difference, it's the rounded of the phi and so on. Okay, so maybe you get 1.55. That's still okay. Okay, so the final number roughly that's correct. So the only typo over here is the previous line. It should be -3. Okay, instead of -4. Okay, any question? Okay, so this is still the first calculation about the drag coefficient. So it's still quite simple compared to the other calculations. So let me continue first. Once we understood how to calculate the drag force and then how to calculate the drag coefficient, now we can apply it into a more advanced application. Okay, later we can use it for separation of particle from a fluid. For the same concept will be applied in the fluidization and so on and so on. Okay, so first we have to check or review the mechanics balance of the particle motion. Okay, how the force balance. So what happens if an object of particle falls at a velocity of u? Okay, so there are three forces acting on the particle moving through the fluid. Obviously, the main one that will exist in all system must be the gravity. The gravity. Okay. So gravity over here, I think is the Fe. Okay. External force. It's called as Fe, refers to external. Okay. We can see that Fe can be calculated as m times the acceleration. Okay, acceleration of the external system. In the case that gravity acts as a external force, then we just have to substitute the acceleration with the gravity constant. Okay, so it could be expressed as m times gravity for if gravity acts as an external forces. And then the second force act on the particle is actually the buoyant force. Okay, so again, imagine about the direction, gravity, that's the Fe, and then the buoyant force that will be in the opposite direction to the external force, to the gravity force. Okay, so buoyant force, the notation is negative if the gravity is positive, or the other way around. Okay, in this case, that will be the second force act on our system if we have a particle. Okay, and for buoyant force, it is calculated as a function of the density, as a function of the acceleration or the gravity constant. Okay, so over here that's the gravity constant, and it's a correlation between particle of the fluid versus the particle of the density of the particle and density of the fluid. Okay, and the last part is about the drag force that we just talked about. Okay, or FD. So this is the new terms that has to be introduced because of the uneven distribution, uneven momentum, and so on. Okay, and the formula just has been used in the previous slide. Okay, CD U squared rho AP per 2. So using this overall force balance, okay, the particle acceleration can be expressed as follows. Okay, so that's the overall particle acceleration. Okay. What does that means? That means if we have a separator, for example, and then we have a presence of small particle coming into this velocity at the inlet, okay, V inlet, for example, then of course, if it's provided with sufficient residence time and sufficient length of the chamber, it may fall. Okay, it may fall. So different particle size will require different residence time, will require different length of the chamber. But if you remember the formula from physics, okay, maybe in TPB in VIDAS or in high school probably, the velocity actually will change along the way. Okay, so when we talk about this lane, okay, when we talk about this lane, the velocity may change along the way. As a free fall velocity and so on. Okay, and this concept also applied over here when we can calculate one key velocity that's very useful to be calculated. Okay, the concept similar with before, the free fall velocity, and so that's our force balance to get into the particle acceleration. Now, if we move everything, the mass into the right part of the equation, and then substitute Fe with mg and then Fb with rho m per rho g and so on. Okay, now you can express the acceleration itself or du per dt as this form. Okay, so the Fe already substituted, Fb already substituted, and Fd already substituted, and then we AE is found in Fe and Fb, so that we can combine it together as a first part of the equation. And motion to gravity. Now, the link between this previous slide, just focus on this AE part, the acceleration part, acceleration of the external force. Okay, if we're working with the gravity, of course AE can be substituted with gravity constant, 9.8 meter per square second square. Okay, and if the force is not, so this is happen if we're working with this kind of lane. Okay, then AE can be directly substituted with G. Okay, but if you've heard anything about cyclone, okay, have anyone heard about cyclone, okay, or an hydrocyclone? This is some kind of separation unit that will be used in chemical engineering. Cyclone is used to separate particle from air. Okay, separate particle from air, and the concept is to utilize the centrifugal force of the system. Okay, so you can imagine that we have an centrifugal force of the system. The idea is the air can follow the centrifugal force and then exits the cyclone, but the particle will have a different impact because of this centrifugal force, because of this rotation. And hopefully, if the cyclone is sized properly, the particle will drop into the bottom part of the cyclone, while the cyclone will keep rotates until it exits the cyclone. So in this case, we have to select the correct RPM, the correct radius of the impeller, okay, in order to separate the particle with a specified diameter and so on. Okay, in this kind of system, then AE the acceleration of the external force can be substituted into r omega square. Okay, and omega is angular velocity. Angular velocity. And it should be in the radian per second. Okay. So that's the derivation when we substitute the AE either in a gravity system, settling system, or in a centrifugal field, for example, using a cyclone. Now we can move forward into the calculation of settling velocity or the terminal velocity. So this should be like the maximum velocity that will happen during this free fall condition. Okay, so a particle falls from rest in stationary fluid under an action of gravity, and then the free falling motion, there will be some acceleration, the du per dt that we just talked about, but at certain point, there will be a constant or maximum velocity that we can find in the system, and that is what we know as a terminal velocity. Okay, and as we know, and based on calculus or based on mathematics principle, if we have a maximum velocity, okay, if we have a u max, that will occur at the location where du per dt is equal to 0, or the first derivative is equal to 0. When we have the first derivative as equal as 0, based on mathematics principle, that's the extreme condition. That's the maximum point. Okay, so using that concept, now we can further applying the previous force balance calculation that we derived in the previous slide. Okay, this is using a gravity, for example, gravity or settling. What if what is the velocity when the particle settles at the bottom of the chamber? That can be called as a terminal velocity. So the derivation is actually simple from the previous equation. So we know that terminal velocity apply at du per dt is equal to 0. So the simplification will be that becomes 0. Okay, that becomes 0. So we just have to move around the equation. In this case, let's say the CD square, the drag force goes into the left part of the equation, and then we get into this simplified derivation. Okay, and all of this number has to be, should already be acquired. Okay, or known. Okay, gravity is of course known. The density is already supplied in the equation. So CD can be calculated from the chart as we just practiced in the beginning of the lecture. Mass, density, AP. The only thing that may change from our previous exercise is actually the velocity. Okay, that's the only thing that may change. Why it changed? Because of the force balance. So this is actually the one that we'll be focusing on, and at du per dt equal to 0, that means u0 is equal to terminal velocity. Okay, so the formula can be calculated quite simply. Okay, u0 now we have just move the 2m into the left part equation, and then CD per row AP now it should be at the bottom. Okay, and then you put a square root to get into the terminal velocity. That should be your generic formula to calculate a terminal velocity. Okay, so that's square root because we are coming from the u square. Okay, so 2m becomes at the top, and then CD row AP becomes at the bottom, and then last we give a square root to find the terminal velocity. Okay, so this is the terminal velocity that happens when acceleration is constant during the final part of the free fall motion. Okay, so this is when the gravity acts as an external force. Okay, if we are working with centrifugal works as an external force, such as the one that found in cyclone, then you just simply have to change the G part over here into the omega square R, as explained in the previous slide. Okay, the rest should be similar. Any questions so far about the terminal velocity definition, concept, and derivation? Okay, let me continue. Then the next step is usually the derivation for a more specific regions of a particle. So previously we already simplifying our why is it important. If you check on this generic, okay, this is the generic terminal velocity, you notice that okay, G should be roughly the same for all systems, regardless of it's a laminar system, regardless it's a transition or a very turbulent system, G should be roughly remains constant. The density also, that's the properties of the fluid and the properties of the particle. Okay. Cross area, again, that directly relates with the diameter particle. The same thing over here. But the problem here is CD, if you remember, this is calculated from chart. Okay. And the number couldn't be simplified using one empirical equation that covers all the regions. So there is no accurate empirical equation that will be applicable in a very laminar and then a mild turbulent and a very turbulent regimes. Okay, so in this case, usually, if we want to use an empirical direct equation for terminal velocity for UT calculation, we should separate this UT into a couple of regimes. Okay, so we will have UT for laminar. Okay, we will have UT for mild turbulent, for example. Okay, and so on and so on, up until the turbulent. Why? So you don't have to confuse yourself about this separation if you just want to stick with this one formula. Okay, if you just want to stick with this formula, it is actually applied for all regimes. The challenge will be you need one more step to calculate the CD in a preliminary step of your calculation. Okay, but for some other people, they like to have not so generalized correlation, but a more direct correlation that can be substituted using the number provided in the equation and so on. Okay, so in that case, you have to understand the UT derivation for each regimes of the particles. Okay. So we over here it's a substitution, or the we know that this is mass, okay, and mass is of course in kilogram, and mass can always be calculated as a function of density times the volume, kilogram per meter cubic times cubic meter. Okay, now it becomes kilogram. Okay, so rho particle remains the same. That's the volume of the particle. Okay. If it's a sphere, then the volume can be substituted with Vd cubic per 6. Okay. And the same thing over here is now we are ready to substitute this m with rho Vd cubic d per 6. Okay, and then in the bottom part we also have a, which is also a function of particle diameter, vd square per 4. So actually it's okay if you want to simplify from this top equation into the bottom equation. It's still generic. Okay, it's still generic. It's still applied in all regimes. It's still applied in all value of the Reynolds number. Okay, by simply substituting this AP and substituting this M, so that now everything is expressed as a dP. Okay, as a particle diameter. Okay. So at some points, the terminal velocity can be determined by using trial and error method by guessing the nRT to solve CD value. Okay, what does it mean? Okay, we know that CD is a function of RE particle. Okay, it's a function of RE particle. The problem is now when we want to calculate Reynolds particle, it is rho slip velocity diameter of the particle divided by mu. Okay, so we don't know directly at the beginning of the calculation. Sometimes we don't know what's the Reynolds number, what's the velocity, and so on. Okay, it's like a circular reference. If you calculate using Excel, you want to calculate velocity. Okay, you want to calculate velocity. In order to calculate velocity, you need to know the drag coefficient. Okay, but the problem is it's the other way around. When you want to know the CD, you have to know the Reynolds. That means when you want to know the CD, you have to know the velocity, which is actually our main objective of the calculation. Okay, so that's a circular reference in Excel calculation. That's why the common practice to solve this problem is actually to perform a trial and error, or make some initial guess. Okay, guess some number of Reynolds number to solve some CD value. Okay, by let's say, okay, what if we assume it's mild turbulent, and if you remember the previous example or exercise, by assuming a mild turbulence, we know that the CD is 0.44, right? By knowing this number, then we can put the CD into this equation, so we can calculate the UT. Okay, then reconfirm. You can get the UT. Okay, then reconfirm the regime back that Reynolds is rho u slip dP per mu. Okay, and then you get what you found as a UT, put it as a u slip. Okay, now you get your initial Reynolds gas, and if it turns out that the Reynolds is mild turbulent regime, as we initially assume, around between 1 to certain thousand number, okay, then our initial assumption holds true, that it is correct for us to assume CD to be 0.44. Okay, but after the reconfirmation that you actually get RE to be less than 1, okay, 0.1 something, okay, you have to recalculate using the other assumption. In that case, maybe you assume the CD to be the one holds for a laminar regime 24 per nRE. Okay, so that's the common practice when we need to calculate terminal velocity. Assume some regime first. In that case, it's simple for you to get the CD, then calculate the UT, then reconfirm the Reynolds using those calculated UT, and so on. Okay, so this is the summary. Okay, the summary of the drag force versus NRE. As you can see over here, usually this is used as a common starting point of an assumption. Why? Because the CD is very simple. It can be assumed as 0.44, so that you can finish the first trial of the calculation quite fast. Okay, but if you confirm that the UT is not correct and the Reynolds is actually now becomes lower than 0.2, this is the laminar. Okay, laminar in particle presence. Then you reiterate second step of the calculation. Now, instead of using CD as 0.4, you put directly the 24 per REP. Okay. So later we will have this example. Okay. So in the next couple of slides, I will only explain the specific region, UT for specific region. Okay, UT for specific region. Here we have 4 regions below 0.2, 0.2 to 500, 500 to 200,000, and more than 200,000. Okay, at least I will explain about the derivation for these two regions. What is the UT specific for laminar? What is the UT specific for the mild turbulent? Okay. So quickly, again, that's the starting point. That's the generic one that I say holds true for all regimes, for all Reynolds numbers. So simply you just need to substitute the CD with CD correlation for a laminar regime. Okay. By using that simplification, now you can solve the problem. Okay, that you will end up with UT equal to GD square delta rho per 18 viscosity. Okay, so maybe I'll just quickly put this derivation. Okay, for G rho P minus rho, that's dP, and then we have 3 times CD is 24 per RE. RE is rho velocity particle per mu rho square. Okay, so okay, that part becomes per 18. Okay, and then at the top we have G rho dP, G rho dP, but then you have extra dP from the bottom that becomes square. Okay, what else? Rho here can be eliminated, and that one, that U is actually the one that we're calculating, the terminal velocity. Okay, so now it becomes UT is equal to G rho P minus rho dP. We have U at the top per 18 mu, something like that. Okay, so then you give a square at both sides of the equation. U t square is equal to, now the square root is left open, rho p minus rho dp u per 18 mu. Okay, the final step, first order of velocity, second order of velocity. So that's our correlation for a laminar. Any question? Is it understood? So if later you'll find an equations that asks about a terminal velocity, and you know directly that it must be in a laminar regime, okay, then you don't have to start from this generic equation. Okay, if you know directly that it must be already in the region of Reynolds below 0.2, then you can simply go to the bottom equation. Okay, UT is GD square delta rho per 18 nu. But if that's too much trouble for you to remember all these different terminal velocity equation, then you you can always start from this generic correlation. Then you will substitute the dp with 24 per nRE and so on. So you have less to be memorized, but you need, let's say, more 1 minute or 2 minutes more to get the number of the CD. Okay, let me continue. Then this is the mild turbulent. This is the mild turbulent regime. Again, this is coming from the generic terminal velocity correlation. If you want to start with the generic correlation, again, that's applied anywhere in the regimes, so it's okay. The only simplification or the only derivation that we need at this point is, you know, that based on the previous chart, CD at this region is actually can be generalized into 0.44 for sphere. Okay, for sphere. For different shape, you must check on the CD in the chart early in the slide. Okay, so in that case, we just need to directly put this 0.44 into the CD part. Okay, then using some simplification, so 4 per 3 divided by 0.44, and then you put the square root, you should get 1.75 as a constant at the outside of the square root. Okay, and this is actually the derivation for a Newton's law. Previously, for a laminar regime, that's the derivation for a Stokes law. Okay, for centrifugal settling, the concept is still the same. The concept is still coming from a previously it was G. Okay, previously it was G. Now it's omega square R. Okay, and velocity is omega R. Why? Again, I remind you that omega is an angular velocity. That means the unit itself is still different with U. Okay, it's angular velocity and the unit is radian per second. Degree, well, yeah, degree per second. U here is a linear velocity, so of course the unit is already meter per second. So in order to make this correlation consistent, we have to multiply by the radius. Radius here is meter, so it becomes meter per second. Okay, so that's the UT, the generic one. Okay, that's the generic correlation if you have centrifugal settling instead of a gravity settling. And using the simplification now, again, just substitute the CD. Same thing with before. If it's a laminar, then it can be simplified using this correlation. I think this is the summary. Sorry. Yeah, this is the summary of the drag force versus Reynolds number versus terminal velocity. Okay. So if there is one of the most important slide in this chapter is this one, the slide 30. Okay. Basically that's the generic correlation for the UT, and then that's the mapping of the CD versus Reynolds. Okay, so that you just need to calculate the Reynolds. Here the Reynolds calculate as rho slip velocity, particle diameter per mu. Once you know that, once you know the Reynolds, then we can calculate the CD, and that can be substituted into the last column to calculate the terminal velocity. For the other two regions, the same concept is still applied. You can derive it directly. Okay, so just substitute this CD with either 24 per REP 1 plus 0.15 RE exponent of 0.687, okay, or simply as CD as 0.1 if it's a very turbulent rate. In order for you to practice, I'll give you 5 to 10 minutes to perform this exercise. Okay, you can do it all together. Okay, as a group assignment or group discussion right now. Okay, I'll give you 10 minutes. Let's say. I don't think I have the solution. Yeah, I don't have the solution at this slide. So I'll give 10 minutes. Again, the first step is assume. Okay, assume. That's the hint. Assume regimes and then reconfirm the Reynolds regime. Okay, you want to start assuming it's laminar. That's fine. If you want to start by assuming this is a turbulent regime, that's also fine. If it's a turbulent regime, that means you assume that the CD to be 0.44. Okay, because it's a the dust particle can be assumed as a sphere. Okay, that's the density. That's the what else required. Okay, I don't provide the viscosity and the density. Okay, that has to be provided. For the final question is actually to calculate the terminal velocity. Okay, so check on this correlation again. If you want to assume it as a turbulent regime, then you can simply go to this line. If you want to assume with laminar regime, then you go to this line. If you want to assume with a turbulent regime that you can put the CD to be 0.44, then that can be substituted as 0.44, that can be substituted as 9.8, and then the dust particle is 2080, particle diameter that's 60 micrometer, 6 minus 5. Okay, so what is not unknown is only the density of the air. Okay, density of the air, and probably later the viscosity of the air, which will be provided later or maybe can be found in Google or in other reference. Okay, please start to perform the calculation. I'll stop sharing my screen while I'm trying to find the number for the density and the particle and the viscosity. Okay, or maybe I can open one-stop solution software. Okay, to find some density and viscosity of the air. Okay, so the density of the air can be assumed as 1.2 kilogram per cubic meter, and the viscosity of the air can be assumed as 2.2 cp, 0.2 centipos. Okay. So if you convert to Pascal second, should be divided by 1000. Okay. So that should be to 10 minus 4 Pascal second. Okay. Okay, please perform in the next 10 minutes. Okay. Assume it's a laminar or assume it's a turbulent. Then you get your CD. Then find what is the UT. Then the UT acts as a slip velocity in the final Reynolds calculation. If you can confirm that your Reynolds consistent or match with your initial assumption, that means if you use CD as 0.44 and then you get Reynolds between 500 to 200,000, then that's correct for only one step required for your calculation. Okay, so if you have any question, just open your mic. Okay, I'll stop in the next 10 minutes to give you time for practice. Okay, anyone finish your calculation? What if you start assuming that it's a turbulent regimes? What do you got as your terminal velocity? Does my Excel windows visible to you or only the PowerPoint?
Only the PowerPoint.
Okay. Anyone got some value? Or if you start by assuming it's a laminar, what's the terminal velocity that you get?
Sir, I assumed it was turbulent and got 0.496
0.496.
for the Reynolds number.
Okay. And the terminal velocity?
1.378.
Okay. And what do you think about those assumptions? Do you get the Reynolds particle to be in the same region with your initial assumption?
No, sir, because
Yeah.
it's not between 500 and 200.
Okay. Yeah, the answer is actually correct. Okay, if you start assuming it's a turbulent, you will get terminal velocity around 1.39 meter per second and Reynolds particle roughly 0.5, and that's already in the turbulent regime. Okay, so but it's not correct to assume CD to be 0.44. So that's a good exercise for you that it's a bit unlucky for you to use your initial assumption to be the incorrect final answer. Okay, but that will not be the case if some of you started with initial assumption of laminar. Anyone tried using an initial assumption of laminar so that the CD is 24 per RE?
I used that, sir, but my final Reynolds is 0.255. It's not less than 0.2.
Okay, let me stop shares first because my Excel is not visible. Okay, and then reconnect. Okay. Okay, do you see the Excel at the right bottom of the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is the assumption. If you assume that it's a turbulent, then you simply use the correlation of UT in the previous slide. Okay, in the previous slide. Hold on a second. That's the formula 1.75 GD delta density per row square. Okay. The problem is now we get the Reynolds particle to be 0.5, which is outside of the applicable formula assume. Okay. So you can confirm whether I made some typo in the calculation. Okay. But if I start with the initial assumption that it is a laminar, then I don't use this correlation, but I use the first segment. UT is GD square delta rho per 18 mu. but that will only be applied if I can confirm that my Reynolds to be below 0.2. Okay, so I just put this number while you're doing it. Okay, so it's not prepared. C6 is the G, and then C2 square dp, particle diameter. And then I have C3 minus C4 is the delta rho, 2080 minus 1.2 divided by 18 mu. 18 mu, yep. Mu is in Pascal second in SI. Okay, so that must be in SI. That must be in SI. Okay, anyone got similar results? Or if you have different results, what's the different assumption or different value that you use? Or different conversion? So over here, if I got my number correct, okay, then the UT is 0. Terminal velocity is 0.012 meter per second. And by putting those numbers as my slip velocity, then my rho u slip d per mu now becomes 0.004. Okay, in this case, it is actually still within my initial assumed formula that the Reynolds has to be below 0.2. Okay, is it understood or any question? No question?
Sorry, sir. Can you explain about the laminar again? Because I got the different value.
Okay, so do you use the same formula? The terminal velocity, GD square delta rho per 18 mu?
Is it different if I use the one above it?
So you start from CD.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it shouldn't be different. It shouldn't be different because the CD now has to be substituted from 24 per RE. Okay, but that means you start with the RE. The problem here is, again, if you want to start with the CD, for laminar, CD is 24 per RE. And to calculate RE over here, you need the slip velocity. And the slip velocity over here is actually the same one with the one that you want to calculate. So yeah, that's the challenge when you start with the top equation. But by putting directly the CD as a 24 per RE, then we can simplify. We can remove the CD. So now everything is only expressed as a function of gravity, particle diameter, density, and viscosity.
Oh, okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, any question? Okay, if not, then I will move on into the, I think this is the last slide before we move into the application. Now it's just a quick comparison if you want to know the terminal velocity of particle 1 versus particle 2. Okay, so we know that it's always start from here, again the generic one. So if now you have two spherical particles but with different characteristics, but you know that both of them are laminar, you know that it has the same size but constructed from different materials, so it has a different density. So this is just like a shortcut for you to have a quick terminal velocity comparison ratio. Okay, so it's just so that means over here, if what we have is a laminar, then you can simply ut per ut, right? G dp square rho p per rho per 18 mu. Okay, so that becomes your ut1 per ut2. Okay, gravity can be dismissed, and if the diameter is the same, then diameter can be dismissed. Okay, what else? Mu, if it's the same viscosity, because it's viscosity is the air, right? Viscosity is the properties of the air, not the properties of the particle. So the properties, the ratio can be dismissed. So you just end up with delta rho per delta rho. Okay, delta rho per delta rho as a first order. Okay. But if you have two spherical particles, the density is the same, but the diameter is different. Okay. Now you end up with the same ratio, but don't forget the square one because d is square over here. If you have two particles share the same falling velocity, it will happen if this is the terms and condition. Okay, that will only happen if your dp1 per dp2 follows this ratio of density. Okay, but if it's for turbulent, then it's first order. Okay, so it's just a quick summary. Okay, but again, if you don't want to complicate your understanding, you can always revert it back to the generic formula and then just perform a quick comparison, just like the one I did before. Which one can be removed or which one is equal to 1 and so on. Okay. I think that's the end of this slide. I will quickly move on into the next slide. I'll stop sharing first. Okay. So this morning I attach a new PowerPoint in the MS Teams. Okay, please open it. Where is it? Yeah, because I think I just only have around 2 hours or at most 3 hours until it will be followed up by Pak Wawan for the last chapter. So at least I think I will talk about gravity settling. Okay. Yep. So that's the title of the slide. Application of fluid flow phenomena with solid particle. Okay, give me 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, so this should be my last slide for this course about the fluid mechanics. So we understand about the drag coefficient and the terminal velocity and the Reynolds particle. Okay, that's three variables that you have to be understood, and you can calculate and apply it in different question and examples. Okay, Reynolds particle, and then CD / FD, okay, drag coefficient, and then last is the terminal velocity. Now we apply it into a unit of operation or equipment. Okay, the first one is a gravity settling chamber. So this is the most simple one, I would say, and can be illustrated very easily using this image. Okay, so example, again, let's say this is the post-treatment of PLTU, okay, coal power generation. So you can imagine that if you have one big boiler and turbine, okay, boiler plus turbine, where you inject some coal to be burned with combustion air, then you will end up with a flue gas, okay, that nowadays still can be emitted to the environment through a stack. Okay, the problem with this application is sometimes we have unconverted coal. We have some unconverted coal. Okay, maybe we have some unconverted coal, or even worse, we have an ash, which is the solid impurities as a product of the coal combustion, and this cannot be emitted to the environment, can be emitted, okay, because of the environmental problem. It's hazardous and so on. Okay, so before they emit this kind of flue gas, it's common to have a post treatment. Okay, that's the post treatment to eliminate this kind of dust, deducting, okay, a particle removal. Okay, and the most traditional one, okay, the most traditional one is just only simply using a gravity settling. So provide enough length so that the heavy particle will settle. Okay, settle means it will goes towards the bottom of the chamber. Now it can be collected. That can be collected at the bottom. Okay, so in sizing this kind of equipment, what you have to realize is the correlation between the particle size and the force balance, the settling. Okay, settling, that means you need to know how the gravity in comparison with the drag force, in comparison with the buoyant force. So just imagine that you can assume it is as a rectangular shape. Okay, with this is the length, this is the height, this is the width, and that's the direction of the gravity. Okay, so you have a particle going downwards, and of course this particle going downwards, we have to maximize the size. We have to make sure that the gravity wins. Okay, because if the particle is too small, for example, then maybe we still have a small particle, but it doesn't goes downward. Okay, it's still almost flat in horizontal direction, and it still exits with the fluid. Okay, with the gas. That shouldn't be happening. Okay, or if what needs to be done if we have a very small particle, that means your first option, of course, you have to extend the length. Of course, you have to extend the length. Okay, or maybe we play around with the area. Okay, because when we play around with the area, we can manipulate the velocity. When we play around with the area, we manipulate the velocity, the meter per second. Okay. If it's fast, if it's very turbulent, then you can imagine then it increase the likelihood for this small particle to be carried over into the outlet of the chamber. Okay. But if we can increase the surface area, then we decrease the linear velocity, then it actually helps us to settle the particle. If this still can't be done, then you can't use this kind of traditional technology. Maybe you have to remove the particle using a cyclone. Maybe you use some electrical precipitating, some kind of more advanced technology. Okay, but that's another topic to be discussed. So imagine the two-dimension illustration. To settle this particle have to drop. It has to drop with the height of h meter, okay, and it has to move less than L meter, okay. It has to drop less than L meter. So if that's L, if it's already dropped in 1/3 of L, that's good. If it's dropped at 2/3 of L, that's good. But we don't want this to drop at more than length of the chamber, okay. So if it's sized correctly, you can imagine the force balance starting from point A, and then it has to drop, let's say, at point B, and that can be considered as an extra tolerance. Let's say you have a fluctuation and so on. Okay. So in terms of simple definitions of this force balance in this gravity chamber system, now the average fluid velocity is calculated using a formula of UF is equal to Q per width multiplied by the height. Okay, that's hopefully clear for you. Linear velocity, okay, that's linear velocity, meter per second. So of course Q is the volumetric velocity, volumetric rate, debit. That's a volumetric flow rate, or cubic meter per second, for example. And that's width in meter. That's height in meter. So you end up with linear velocity along the horizontal direction. Okay, UF. And average time needed to flow along L is L per UF. Okay, that should also be quite straightforward. Second, L is meter. Here is meter per second. That you just calculate from here. So how this is sometimes can be called as well as a residence time. How long the particles remains inside of the chamber. Okay, so if the chamber is 10 meter and then the flow rate is 10 meter per second, then of course within 1 second the gas already exits the system. But if the length is 10 meter, but then the velocity is 1 meter per second, then you have 10 seconds before the particle exits the system. So then that's in the horizontal directions of the chamber. Okay. Now we have to think about the vertical. Okay. So if you see the subscript, okay, if you see the subscript H over here, that means the residence time only for the horizontal direction when it enters and it exits in the horizontal direction. Now see the balance in terms of the vertical coordinates. Okay, see the balance in terms of the vertical coordinates. What happens if I have particle A at the top at the entrance of my chamber? Okay, and I know that the height of my chamber is h meter. Then the time requires for the particle to settle is simply by dividing the meter of the chamber with the meter per second of the particle into the horizontal, into the vertical direction. Okay, So the question now is, where do I get my UP, the particle velocity to the downside direction? Okay, so UP should be in the downside direction. And if you remember the formula that we just explained in the early part of this session, it has a very direct correlation with how we calculate the terminal velocity, okay, with the Reynolds particles. Okay, so if we want to make sure that particle A can be settled at point B before it exits the chamber, okay, at least we have to make sure that T horizontal is equal to T vertical. Okay, if that's actually what happens, I think this is what end up. Okay, the accent, for example, if we get directly that T horizontal is equal to T vertical, that means by the time it reach the horizontal end of the chamber, it also get to the point of the bottom of the chamber in the vertical coordinates. Okay. So the question now, if you want to settle, which one has to be provide larger? Okay. Which one is correct? Do you want your residence time in the horizontal to be higher than vertical, or do you want your residence time in the horizontals to be less than vertical residence time? Which one is correct? If you want to get into this point, for example. What is the acceptance criteria for you to make sure that it already settles before it exits the chamber in the horizontal direction?
The first one, sir.
Yeah. Okay, you can imagine. Okay, just use a quick number. Let's say you have 10 seconds for particle A to get into the end of the horizontal chamber. Okay, let's say the 10 seconds. And what if I only require 5 seconds? I only need 5 seconds for my particle to settle into the vertical part. This is actually good for our purpose. Why? Because now it already settles before it reaches the ends of the chamber. Not the other way around. Okay, this is not a good example. If we have 5 seconds, okay, we only need 5 seconds for particle A to get into the final end of the horizontal chamber, but it requires 10 seconds before it settles to the bottom of the chamber. Then likely it's still gonna be carried over. Okay, that's still gonna be carried over. So that's not good. Okay, this is what we want. That's the limit. TH is equal to TV. And then by substituting, okay, then you just need to substitute the TV and TH. Okay, that's the TV. You still have it in this slide. H per UP. Okay, that's the TV. Okay, and TH is provided in the previous slide. Remember, TH is L per UV, so it's WHL per Q. So that's the TH. The limit will be is if you can make sure that the UP, the vertical free fall velocity, is equal to Q per WL. Okay. And again, I told to you, check your assumption, whether the particle is big, whether the particle is small, and how fast is the air within the chamber. Then go back into the same formula that we just used previously. If it's a laminar, then UP can be calculated using this correlation. Okay, that's exactly the same formula with how we calculate the UP. And this first approach, the fundamental particle approach, has to be equal with the second approach that we match with the geometry of the gravity chamber. Okay, both of them will be can be calculated as to get into the UP. Okay, so over here, then by moving around the equation, okay, now we can so this is the example. If width and length of chamber are known, okay, if these are known, it's already defined, it's already built, then what you can do is to calculate what's the maximum diameter of particle that can be separated. But less than this particle diameter, it's likely the particle still to be carried over because we don't provide enough time. Okay, so that's one alternative questions. Okay, if we already installed the chamber and then we know the residence time and so on, so by substituting all of this into this equation, we know the viscosity of the air, the volumetric flow rate of the flue gas, gravity, the width, the length, so everything, the dimensions are already fixed. The one variable that we can control in this case is we cannot control what is the minimum particle that can be separated. The smaller the particle, below this threshold, okay, you can assume it as a threshold, right? Below this threshold, if your actual particle is below this threshold using this formula, you will not be able to separate the particle using this defined dimension of the chamber. Okay, so that's first approach. Okay, the other approach is, of course, if you what if you know if dp is defined, okay, dp and q is defined, are defined, then you can use this correlation to calculate W multiplies by L. Okay, so put this in the left side of the equation, put dp in the right side of the equation. Mu known, q known, delta rho known, g known. Let's say you already measured your particle, it's 10 micrometer, for example. Then you can use that correlation to calculate what is my surface area. W multiply L is the surface area. Okay, so that's my surface area. So if I have, that's my chamber, that's my length, that's my width. Okay, then you can define what should be your surface area in order to make sure that your vertical time settling can be reached below it exits into the end of the horizontal chamber. Okay, how many times do I have left? Okay, so I think around 5 minutes or so. So this is the final 2 slides of my lecture today. Next week I will continue with the filtration and fluidization. Let's imagine that's our Q, volumetric flow rate, cubic meter per second. That's my temperature, that's the dust particle. That's my length, that's my width, that's my height. That's the density of the particle. That's the density of the air. That's the mu. Estimate what is the smallest particle diameter that can be separated, and check whether particle flow is constantly laminar. So you have to check whether the particle flow is consistently laminar, especially if you assume to use the terminal velocity correlation using the laminar regime. That means assuming the CD to be 24 per NRE. Stokes law, just as has been described. Okay, so in this case, you just need to directly substitute all of this number. So if you have some hint like this, whether the particle is constantly laminar, it's like a hint that, okay, you can start to assume it's a laminar. That means you can assume that the CD to be 24 per NRE. Then you can assume the UT to be the Stokes law correlation. And then last step, reconfirm that you get the Reynolds particle to be within those laminar regime. Okay. Because again, this formula only applied for laminar. Okay, only applied for laminar. If it's a turbulent, then you have to go with the different empirical equation where you assume the CD to be 0.44. Okay, so that's the maximum particle diameter that can be separated. Then you just need to put all this number. That's the mu in Pascal second, again has to be in SI. That's the Q, that must be in cubic meter per second. That's the gravity, that's the width, that's the length, that's the delta rho in kilogram per cubic meter. Then you will end up with the results of around 1.5 10 minus 5 meter. Okay, that's like 15 micrometer. Yeah, if you have a particle with size of 15 micrometer, that will settles at the end of the chamber. Okay, that means if your particle is below 1.553, sorry, that's not correct, 15.3 micrometer, it's actually easier to settle. The bigger the particle, the heavier the gravity, right? That means it will settle within the chamber. Within chamber. But if your diameter is smaller than 15.29 over here, then carry it over to gas outlet. By the time it reached the horizontal direction, it hasn't settled to the bottom of the vertical direction. Okay, then last but not least, reconfirm the Reynolds. You still know the U particle that can be calculated as a function of CD, okay? Or just by doing the correlation that has been explained in the previous slide, the residence time concept, okay? Because that's the cubic meter per second. That's the meter square of the surface area towards the horizontal, towards the vertical velocity. Then you use the threshold dp from your calculation. Okay, then you can confirm the Reynolds number. Then this one gets you to 0.019, which is below 0.2, which is within the laminar regimes. So this formula is applicable for this system. But again, if you found out that the Reynolds particle after the final step of the calculation now, your Reynolds is above 500, okay, then it must be a turbulent. Okay, so you cannot simplify using this correlation, but it has to start from the CD as 0.44 and so on and so on. Okay, yeah, I think I will conclude my session now. Okay, I only have with 2 more application. First is about filtration. Maybe that will take around 15 minutes or 20 minutes something. Okay, and then after filtration, this is the main parts about the particles application, which is fluidization. Okay, this will take a bit longer, maybe around 1 hour, I would imagine, with the exercise and other examples. Okay, so I cannot rush this, so maybe I still need 2 hours of class to finish the slide. Okay, at least 2 hours. The thing is, our next session is Tuesday, and we only have 1 hour meeting, right? So because in the following Thursday, I think Pak Wawan will finish the rest of the course. Okay. To make it more efficient, is it possible that we have a 2-hour session on Tuesday instead of breaking it down into the next Thursday? What's the possible schedule? Our regular class is 1 to 2 p.m. if I'm not mistaken. Are you all open? If we have 1 to 3 p.m. and then by Thursday you only have one hour session with Pak Wawan. Any comments? So 23rd, is it possible that we have 2 hours? Then you only have 1 hour session on Thursday by Pak Wawan.
So maybe we'll discuss. Can we discuss as a class first? Because from 1 to 3 we have. I mean, if it's 1 to 3, then we have class at 3 to 5, so it'll be like 4 hours of consecutive class. So maybe we can discuss as a class first. Is that okay?
Okay, yeah, sure. But let me know in the WhatsApp group, okay? Or you want to have class from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. That's also possible for me. Or any other option. Or the last approach is we have a regular meeting, but on Thursday maybe I will only give a lecture by about 1 hour, then Pak Wawan will take over.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
We'll inform in the WhatsApp group later.
Okay, that's it then for today. See you on Tuesday.
Thank you, sir.
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 Thank you, sir.